It's Monday, December 18th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is the one and only Scott Pianowski. Scott, what's going on, buddy?
Not much. Fun day of National Football League action, getting eliminated in my playoffs left and right. But hey, I made the playoffs. That's the skill of fantasy football. And we got to unpack, for starters, we got to unpack this Baltimore-Jacksonville game. You know, I'm sure a lot of people were thinking, okay, I'm an underdog, but I got guys in Baltimore, I got guys in Jacksonville. I could bail this thing out. You probably did not bail this thing out. You're probably in dire shape, needing a Monday Night Miracle.
Yeah, you're right. Let's get right into it. Ravens 23, Jaguars 7. Man, let's start on the Jaguars side of this here, Scott, because it has been just one frustrating game after another for Jacksonville. Like, maybe I'm slow to the update here. Maybe people have let go of the dream of Jacksonville's upside long ago. But man, this certainly felt like a nail in the coffin moment for any of these like optimistic hopes we had about this Jags team. To me, that offense is going to go down as one of the biggest disappointments of the season.
For sure. And summed up nicely in this game where Calvin Ridley has 12 targets, another near touchdown. He only gets 5 for 39 out of that. Despite throwing 43 passes and despite rushing for 41 yards, Trevor Lawrence, I think, sits as the quarterback 20 right now. My dog is so upset about this. He's barking. I apologize for that. But he was upset at the Jaguars play tonight. In fact, really, the only players who got home, a couple of Ravens made pars, I guess. We'll get to them in a minute. But any Jacksonville player you needed, Lawrence let you down. Ridley let you down. Zay Jones was okay before getting hurt. So I don't want to be too hard on him. 5 for 59. I guess you couldn't have expected much more than that from Ridley. And we've talked a lot about Travis Etienne needing touchdown deodorant. And this was very much an Etienne game, 10 for 31 on the ground. A very forgettable 4 for 28 as a receiver. I don't think he's a special receiver. So, and 7 points. The Jaguars left a lot of points on the field. Of course, they missed 2 field goals. This is a more competitive game maybe than the 23-7 final score indicates. But Jacksonville, the bottom line is it feels, Matt, like they're kind of treading water. I wouldn't say it was a step back this season, but after the way they finished last year, they so strong to make the playoffs. And then they have that classic comeback to beat the Chargers. And I know, comebacks against the Chargers, they kind of give those away at the airport. But we thought maybe this is a plane taking off, and we like things to be linear. And for a lot of different reasons, Ridley's season has had stops and starts. It's pretty obvious they miss Christian Kirk. Evan Ingram was on absolute heater until tonight. He only has 4 short catches, and this game wasn't impactful. I don't know. I feel the AFC has a lot of teams that could be thinking about a Super Bowl in 2 months, thinking about a Super Bowl next year and stuff. I don't know where the Jaguars are. I think they're a good team, not a great team in a weak division, but it's a division that's getting better. We like Shane Steichen. They're going to have their quarterback back next year. I don't know. I'm just a little. This kind of sums up the Jacksonville experience. You're interested, you're tempted, you're teased, and then ultimately at the end of the day, you're disappointed.
That is so perfectly said, honestly, about Jacksonville, and starting with the fact that it's not as if this was really a step back. It just was kind of stagnant. It was just where we were last year. Even you look at Trevor Lawrence, like his overall season. His interception rate is up, and this is even before this game tonight. Like coming into week 15, his touchdown rate is down. His interception rate is actually slightly up, but like yards per completion, 10.6 last year, 10.9 this year. Adjusted yards per attempt, 7.3 last year, 7 this year. Just regular old yards per attempt, actually the complete inverse of that. Like his passing success rate or overall player success rate, 48.1% last year, 47.5% this year. His completion rate, 66.3% last year, 66.6%. Like it just all feels so very similar to where it was last year. And then there are so many things around him that I think are not as good as we thought. Travis Etienne, forget what the fantasy numbers say. This is one of the least effective rushing teams in the NFL. I don't know where they rank in like some of these offensive line metrics and stuff like that, but that line is a mess. Like they can't run block well, and they cannot hold up in pass protection, like to let routes develop downfield. And honestly, like I don't know where you are on Lawrence specifically, but like coming to the end of year 3 here, like I'm kind of ready to have the talk about Trevor Lawrence. Like, did we get over our skis in kind of pushing him into that top group of quarterbacks. I think we did. And I'm not saying like it's over for him or this is who he is or like all he ever will be, right? Like he's still very young. There's still plenty of time here. And like I said, I don't think things around him have been perfect this year. I think Doug Peterson giving up play calling duties to start the year to Press Taylor was like a mistake that kind of doomed the season before it even began. But Lawrence, I think at this point is right now sitting at a plateau. Like we just talk all the time as if these quarterbacks are just going to go up. But man, I think there was definitely wish casting. Producer Colin actually just said that in the chat, like some wish casting for Lawrence, and assuming things were a little bit better around him than expected, I think has led to a very disappointing season that honestly, like I do think I was slow to really realize in real time what was happening.
For sure. Well said. I mean, he was quarterback 7 last year. I realize cumulative rankings can be a little bit misleading, but that felt about the season he had. Into today, quarterback 13. And the thing is, you would have drafted Lawrence thinking, this is my starter. This is my guy. I'm playing him every week. I'll get somebody for the bye week. Maybe I'll get a backup just for grins. But you weren't drafting Lawrence thinking, I need to proactively get a second quarterback. And I realize it's been a year. A lot of quarterbacks haven't played well. Quarterbacks got hurt. The Aaron Rodgers dream died 4 snaps into the season. That's been one of the biggest stories of the NFL this year. But it's not like you could say, oh, why didn't you make the playoffs this year, Trevor Lawrence? Or why'd you lose in the semifinal, quarterfinals, whatever, Trevor Lawrence? I don't know if it's that bad, but maybe it's worse sometimes to have a player who feels too good to bench, too good to cut, or, it's so hard to trade a quarterback in a lot of fantasy leagues. You feel like you have to play him because you're tied to, and then every once in a while he'd start running more. There's a span where he was getting some of that goal line equity back. As I said, they got Ingram going back in form the last few weeks. Ridley's had his share of good games. Just they've been spaced out so much, and there's been a lot of bad games. So a step back. Next year, Lawrence will be drafted as, quarterback 9, quarterback 10, quarterback 11, somebody who maybe where Dak Prescott was this year, right? Where it's like, okay, yeah. I think he's my guy, but I'm not positive. Maybe I'll be one of the earlier teams to get a second quarterback. You might have drafted Jared Goff in that area. I think that's kind of where Lawrence is going to be into his second season, I guess his third season now with Doug Peterson.
That's a good comparison to Dak. Like these, like things need to go all the way right around these type of quarterbacks, like that are kind of in that Dak tier. And I think Trevor is not in that Dak tier. I think he was placed into it this year. I don't actually think he is there yet, but I think he could easily be in that group at some point. At any point, he could jump into that group because I think he's talented enough to do it. He's got to play with more consistency. He's got to stop fumbling, but like everything kind of needs to go right around those guys for them to have the type of fantasy season and honestly like just the overall passing season that Dak has had this year, even though obviously he's coming, we'll talk about his game here in a minute. Not one of the best showings, but like a lot of things got to go right. They didn't go right for Trevor this year. I think it all started for Dak, obviously, when the head coach, again, it sounds weird to say this coming off the week that the Cowboys had, when the head coach actually said, I'm going to put more on my plate and take more ownership of this offense, and we're going to go down or we're going to go up with me. Maybe Doug Peterson has that moment this coming season after what I think, again, is going to end up being a disappointing year this year. Let's wrap it up with the Ravens here. And like you said, not a ton got home for the Ravens from like a pure fantasy perspective, which also, by the way, does feel very indicative of the season that they have had this year, right? Like we're coming on this podcast all the time, like, man, Lamar Jackson's playing great, and he's like not even getting 20 fantasy points. And I think that was the case in this game. Keaton Mitchell probably suffered, John Harbaugh said after the game, a season-ending injury, which is unfortunate, man. That was a brutal play, but at least Isaiah likely got there. If you were brave enough to start Gus Edwards based on my weird feeling that the Jags were going to let them throw on them and get down to the 1 yard line and Gus Edwards was going to punch it in. That did happen, but again, not a lot got home. Zay Flowers, not much. 1 catch for 7. Odell Beckham, 1 catch for 14. Not a lot got home for the Ravens in the pass game besides Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, as you said, Likely and Edwards, they justify it, but those receivers really hurt you. I think Zay Flowers, the thing with Flowers is that he is already such a polished route runner and such a dynamic player, and he can create separation. And we saw, Beckham, he had his best game of the season probably last week, where he was 15 yards behind the Rams, it felt like, on that touchdown. So a lot of people proactively would have looked at pieces in this Baltimore passing game as stuff you could play here. Certainly nobody expected a 30-point game. The total was probably well into the 40s. So, Jackson, 97 rushing yards, one passing touchdown. It goes to Likely. He ends up being quarterback 9, and our colleague Frank Schwab has already put up a piece about, what does this do to Jackson's MVP candidacy? I still think Jackson can win the MVP because the voters have proven that it's a recency bias award. It's a who was the 1 seed, who was the 2 seed award. But I don't think anything Jackson's done to this point in the season makes him the MVP. I really do. I think he's had an okay season, been a little bit turnover heavy. And it felt like tonight, I don't know, I feel like they did enough to win. I don't want to throw a parade for a guy who threw for 171 yards. I know he ran for 97, and that's great. And I know there's that signature play where he got away from the pass rush. It looks like a sure sack. And as far as I'm concerned, he threw like a semi-Hail Mary to Likely, and Likely made a great catch. That's one of those plays that's like one of those no, yes throws. I don't know. I think Jackson has a exciting upside as he gets more comfortable with Flowers and as he spreads his way. Zay Flowers is going to be a great player in this league. I feel really confident about that. Obviously, they lose Mark Andrews. Likely's been a nice substitute, but he's not Mark Andrews. I still feel like we haven't seen the perfect surrounding setup, the perfect context for Jackson yet for him to really, and he has already won an MVP justifiably. I feel like Jackson has an upper tier he hasn't scratched yet, but I don't know, man. I feel like they just left a lot on the bone. He was quarterback 9 this week. You probably needed him to play better than that. And the Ravens did enough to win against a Jaguar team that didn't really do much of anything right tonight. So I don't know. Forgive me if I'm not throwing a parade for the Ravens, and I'm not looking forward to all the Zay Flowers and OBJ questions I'll probably face next week when they play the Niners. And that may go a long way to deciding who the MVP is, because Brock Purdy, probably the favorite right now. The Niners look like the best team in football. The Ravens could easily be the best or second best team in the AFC. They're certainly set up to have one of those top seeds. So I think next week is going to sort a lot of stuff out.
Yeah, I almost don't want to get too deep into the MVP discussion, and we're going to talk about it later. It'll happen. We're going to talk. It's going to be a discussion point. Okay, it is what it is. But so much of it, I think, because for me, the two favorites right now let me say that again. It is a broken award. Like Brock Purdy even today said Christian McCaffrey should be the MVP, and like I don't think he's totally wrong. I think that's a pretty fair thing to observe when you actually watch this team play and not just look at the stats and then the resume of past winners. But I think it will probably come down to Brock Purdy versus Lamar Jackson, and since we'll get those guys head to head next week, it could end up being a big deciding point. But I would just say, for my money, I do think Lamar has had a great year. I don't think it's been perfect. I think he has been a little more turnover heavy than people want to admit, especially with the fumbles. He has left some plays in the field, but I would say he's had a great season, and one that is pretty, I think, really encouraging when you think about this offense long term. Like Todd Monken's probably not a guy that's going to get a head coaching job. Like he's going to be back there next year too. And I just think like you said, there's so many arrows pointing up in this offense. Maybe this isn't a vintage MVP type of campaign from Lamar, but it's pretty darn close. And I do think Collinsworth said it really well, that it's hard to quantify just how much value he brings to this team. But then you watch him play and you're like, my God, he is adding so much to this offense. All right, let's jump into the headliners here, starting with Bills 31, Cowboys 10. A pretty surprising result, I would say, just from a final score perspective. But Scott, we can't really call this player surprise because we've been talking about him recently on the show and like how his stock has been on the rise, especially since Joe Brady took over. But how often are we coming out of a Bills blowout win and the headliner's not Josh Allen? In this instance, it's James Cook, who demolished the Dallas Cowboys, 25 carries, 179 yards and a touchdown. He also chipped in 42 yards and a touchdown through the air.
Yeah, James Cook says, hey, make some room for me. I can be a league winner. One of the big things about him into this week was that they had, even though he wasn't getting a ton of route share, he was getting, when he was on the field in a passing down, he was getting targeted a lot. Cook was just dominant today, and the game got so much out of hand, and Cook was rolling, that just became a game where Buffalo said, okay, if our defense and our running game is going to win it. Josh Allen throws 15 passes in this game. I mean, at least he did have the one touchdown to Cook, and he did run one in, but what a beatdown. I thought there was a chance that Dallas might come out flat because they beat Philadelphia. That was their big albatross game. Mm-hmm. Monkeys off the back. The out-of-conference game doesn't mean as much. But even so, Buffalo's one of my 5 picks. I'm not surprised Buffalo won. I'm not even surprised Buffalo, quote-unquote, controlled the game. Buffalo taking Dallas to the woodshed like this did surprise me. I thought Dallas was past that. And I don't think there's really that much to say about Buffalo. Allen will be fine. At least Diggs was active in this game. For a 15 pass game, at least he did catch 4 of those passes. I was shocked that Dallas laid this kind of an egg because nobody thought Buffalo had a special defense. They've obviously lost a lot of personnel. It was shocking to me to see, and I even wonder why Dallas was even keeping their key personnel in the game late. They got a touchdown. If you had CeeDee Lamb, you got that late garbage time touchdown. He was bottled up. Dak had his worst game of the season by far. I don't know. Do we have to recalibrate the Cowboys, or maybe we just write it off? The NFL is an outlier league. When you see those outliers, you usually just throw them in the garbage can. Maybe it's just one of those cases.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't even know if I've fully digested exactly what happened to Dallas yet, because watching that game, it was so easy to get caught up with, man, this is why we want to see the Bills in the playoffs, right? Like, this is why they should get into the dance. I mean, it's obviously you get what you deserve ultimately if they don't get in, if they don't get the help they need to get in. They've done this to themselves by losing some games they shouldn't. So it was easy to get caught up in that. But the Cowboys part of it, I mean, rarely can you tell from a broadcast copy that, like, man, they just don't have anybody open. They're not getting anybody open downfield, right? Which is why it's important to watch film and stuff like that. But for an offense that had been so, Dak hits the top of his drop, he plants his foot, he gets that thing out of there, and like CeeDee Lamb is open, somebody's open. There was just none of that in this game, and I don't know how you don't come out of a performance like that, at least not recalibrating expectations a little bit. I mean, one game is one game, and almost every team this year has had some sort of stumbling block. Even the Niners went through a 3-game stretch where they didn't look their best, right? But they figured things out. I think this is one of those moments, Scott, where, if you have Mike McCarthy's skepticism still, you're still kind of, you're hanging on to that, right? You're like, all right, let's see them do it against a real team. I mean, this is, I know they just beat the Eagles. Like you said, that was a big monkey they had to get off their back. But I don't know. As you can see, because I'm rambling around here, I'm still processing this as well.
It seems like every time Dak threw a pass to CeeDee Lamb, there were 3 Bills around him.
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like if you had told me that Buffalo was allowed to play with 13 or 14 defenders, I would have believed it. Producer Colin gave us some notes. He said all the sacks he thought felt like coverage sacks, which was I can buy that. Dak, it's so interesting. Dak Prescott was the lead of Peter King's column last week, and he was talking about how confident Dak was playing. And it's just like all that confidence just got left in Dallas. They brought none of it to Buffalo, but you would just think that that's the type of thing that gets fixed going forward. Now, the schedules, Buffalo, we know they have that Miami game tucked in week 18, but they have the Chargers and the Patriots coming up. So we know where the Chargers are at right now, and the Patriots, I can't imagine they're going to get in their way. Dallas has Miami, Detroit before closing with Washington in week 18. So you would think next week. I know Miami just pitched a shutout against the Jets, but it was the Jets. I would think Dallas would be back in play. Anybody you wanted to play from Dallas today, I think you're going to have to play them next week at Miami.
I totally agree. I feel like they can get it figured out. This offense has just been running so well. I think when they got, I do wonder if it's the type of offense that, like, hey, if you get behind in like negative game script, right? Because it's so based on timing and precision from the quarterback. And like I said, you hit the top of the drop and you get the ball out quick. I do wonder if we see like Miami, like they did today, obviously very different teams, but if they did today, they build a big lead. Can they shoot themselves out of that hole? I do think that's a question I have with Dallas coming out of this one, because it is still guys like, I mean, CeeDee Lamb is an elite player and like he's separate, but I think that guys like Cooks, I think guys like Gallup, even Ferguson to a certain extent, are guys you've got to sort of scheme open. Like, I mean, you've got to get them in one-on-one situations with Michael Gallup. He's got to win like a big downfield pass, like he did against the Eagles last week. Not as much like a bunch of dudes that can just go get you something when you need it. They have one guy that can do that. I think Jake Ferguson's pretty close to being that guy, but he's still sort of an unproven player. So for me, I think that's another big question I have with this team coming out of it.
And just to put a period on the Bills, now I realize, look, 49 rushing attempts, 15 passing attempts, that's just an unusual split that we're not going to see a lot. Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakir, Dalton Kincaid, all go catchless. And not that Dawson Knox was on anybody's radar. He didn't even draw a target in this game. This is the three amigos. This is Josh Allen, this is Stephon Diggs, and this is James Cook, period, end of sentence. You can't play Kincaid until we see a show me game. guys like Shakir, this is the type of player you drop in the fantasy playoffs. You get a backup running back or something like that, somebody with speculative value. And Gabe Davis, I don't think anybody, unless they're backed into a corner, wants to play Gabe Davis in the fantasy playoffs. It's just right now, they've really narrowed their concentration. With 27 touches for Cook. Wow.
I mean, the Bills have never had a run game like this ever during the Josh Allen era here. This has never been a part of the equation. And because of that, I think this is a big reason they wanted to kind of involve the 2 tight end stuff. And like Dawson Knox is a better blocker than Dalton Kincaid. Like that is not something Kincaid is going to do, is line up as a traditional tight end and like help seal the edge, stuff like that. So he's going to lose opportunity with Dawson Knox back and the team playing this way. That makes him a guy, like you said, I think is really, really difficult to trust until you get another show me game. Let's move on to Browns 20, Bears 17. Joe Flacco, Scott, he does it again.
Yeah, we talked about last week, the comeback story I didn't realize I needed. Flacco throws for 374 in this game, a couple touchdowns. He had the 3 picks. I feel like all 3 of the Flacco games have been similar, where the highs have been really high. There's been some mistakes. There's been some turnovers, been some sacks. He was dropped 4 times in this game, but he threatens the entire field. And that makes Amari Cooper capable of, having the day he had today. He had a long touchdown. He goes over 100 yards. David Njoku was a monster, 14 targets, 10 catches, 104 yards and a touchdown. I don't think anybody's thought that Njoku was capable of doing that with the other quarterbacks on this roster. And I include Deshaun Watson, whatever Deshaun Watson is these days, in that group. David Njoku has been brought back to life. He's gone from, should I even roster him, to can I play him, to like, okay, you're going to take him away from my, I got both of my hands, all 10 of my fingers, and maybe a couple of my toes clenched on David Njoku right now. You cannot pry him away from me. He looked fantastic. And on the flip side of this game, I just feel sorry for anybody a lot of people asked about Justin Fields today, and it was a depth call. Some people, I thought it was right to play Fields. Some people maybe not. We know the Browns have a good defense. Fields didn't run for as many yards as you thought, but Fields threw 2 touchdown passes that don't show up in the box score. One of them was a perfect ball to Bob Tunyon in the first half that Tunyon dropped like 7 different times. And now, granted, the Hail Mary would have been a fluke because it was a deflected pass, but it landed in Darnell Mooney's belly. It was a handoff. It was like, here you go, Darnell Mooney. You're the hero. Everybody's happy in Chicago. And I don't know how he dropped it. I don't know how the ball didn't catch him. It reminded me of that curse catch for Seattle in the Super Bowl where he's on his back and the football says, you don't have to catch me. I'll catch you. That ball caught Darnell Mooney, and somehow it ended up on the turf. I don't know how, but this felt like a rock fight for most of the day. And Flacco, I get it. They put up a lot of production late, but he ends up with 374. Nowhere during the afternoon did you ever think he'd even get to like 250. And he put the ball where we wanted. I mean, maybe if people need Elijah Moore, they're disappointed. 8 Cedric Tillman targets were surprising. But Cooper, strong game. And Njoku goes off. He must be right under Sam Laporta on the tight end board because Laporta went crazy on Saturday night. We'll get to that a little bit later. But Joe Flacco deserves, they made a commitment to him. Game ball last week. They say he's their starter the rest of the year. And it's just so nice that I can take pieces of an offense. We've always liked Amari Cooper. We've always liked Elijah Moore. Today wasn't a great game. We've always liked David Njoku, and it's Joe Flacco in his late 30s keeping these guys relevant or making them relevant.
Behind an offensive line that has issues too. That was something I thought watching that game. There were a lot of times, and they couldn't run the ball at all. And by the way, that's so encouraging that, hey, we're the Cleveland Browns. We're built on our run game, but we're down to our 3rd string right tackle. We have other offensive line issues. We're down to our backup left tackle, and we're not going to even try to establish the run game. You're definitely going to get Joe Flacco crushed a few times, and like you said, he was sacked a bunch, and there was pressures like throughout the day. Montez Sweat had another fantastic game, but we're just going to drop back, and because we know we're not going to be able to run here against the Bears. Run defense has been very, very good, and it's just so impressive, Scott. Like, You're so right to say David Njoku was a guy that was droppable. Like, I know I picked him up on the one team I have him on. I picked him up off waivers. I didn't draft any David Njoku this year. And he was a guy that was even when they had sort of figured out like, okay, we've got these backup quarterbacks in here, DTR, especially they were really trying to get him involved in the screen game and like little yak stuff underneath. Like, no, this guy's a downfield monster. And he was, if he wasn't the best player on the field on Sunday, he was close.
People forget he was a 1st-round pick in his draft class going back to 2017 and was somebody who had a decent first year back when we expected nothing from rookie tight ends, had a step up in his second year. He got hurt in his third year. And I think we were always waiting for this breakout season. And he's having it now. I mean, he's going to challenge for 1,000 yards. He's going to end up the season being like tight end 4, tight end 5 or something like that. And it's all because of Joe Flacco, the Browns' fourth answer at quarterback. On the flip side, I feel bad about, I gave out Donta Foreman on the sleeper list, and I was surprised he was under 50% rostered, and they had committed to him last week. I knew the Browns were a horrible matchup. I'm like, well, if they get near the goal line, he'll be the guy. He'll be the touch guy. And he actually got a ton of carries at the goal line. And again, it looked like Cleveland had 15 defenders. Chicago was just getting killed at the point of attack. These plays were dead on arrival. And we see when Chicago wanted to go hurry up or go into their pass game, Rashawn Johnson makes more sense to that package. Nobody acquitted themselves well here. Johnson got 60 total yards, but that wouldn't have done much for you. But Foreman next week, I think he gets Arizona. So I would actually go back to Foreman, even though he had 6 carries for -6 yards. But I still feel good about him. And DJ Moore, 4 for 52 on 8 targets. There were ball plays left on the field. It was a little bit windy. I feel like that easily could have been like the game Cooper had. Could have been DJ Moore's game too.
I agree with you. And the Darnell Mooney, obviously, the play there to end it on the Hail Mary, like you said, how did he not catch that? He actually and if you watch it, he actually ended up kicking it away at the very end. Like when he's trying to grasp it, his leg, and that's just how football is sometimes. It's a weird shaped ball and it bounces weird ways. Literally bounced off his foot and he kicks it into the air at the very end of it. So it was definitely a frustrating moment, and he's had a very frustrating season. Like this is a guy that's not made a lot of plays for them, and it's a reminder that it's probably not going to be Justin Fields next year. It's going to be whoever they take first overall. But they have other things to work on, even though they got the DJ Moore acquisition so right.
Did you ever catch a game-winning touchdown pass?
No, I didn't do a lot of catching. Let me put it that way. I did not do a lot of catching.
Really good Hail Mary by Fields, by the way. He put the air under the ball. When you saw the ball in the air, you thought this has a chance to be caught by somebody. Maybe it should have been an interception. But anyway, yeah, Fields, man. Where are you? Really quickly, because we have a lot to get to. Where are you at with Fields right now? I know they're going to be in an interesting position. They're probably going to have the number 1 pick. Would you, if you were a fan of a team that didn't have a quarterback, would you want them to trade for Fields? I mean, just give me a state of the union on Fields right now. Yeah,
take a shot. I think what he's going to go for is interesting. I do think that I was a little interested that Charles Robinson, our colleague, actually wrote a piece about this last week, and it didn't sound like he was going to get that much compensation back, or at least as much as maybe Bears fans might think. I have heard other people make the comparison to the Sam Darnold deal. I'm like, damn, dude, Fields was way better than Sam Darnold was when he got traded by the Jets, but maybe the league just doesn't view him that way. I think if I was a team, Steelers are a great example. We'll talk about them later. They clearly, I think, have a quarterback problem. I would want them to bring in Fields. Like, okay, we're going to be too good to draft a quarterback, right? Obviously, the Falcons are another team. We're too good to draft a quarterback. Can he come in here and give us a little shot in the arm, compete with our current starter or whatever? That's if I was a fan of that type of team, I would want them to make that.
Wow, I love both of those landing spots because they have offenses that are just screaming for even an average quarterback, which I think Fields can definitely be. I'm not, here's the bottom line. I think most people probably aren't giving up on Fields. I'm not either. And I even think if you look at him at the right time of day, you can see some upside there too.
Yeah, I don't know if he can become like an A-tier quarterback, but I think he's a very viable starting quarterback. He's just a flawed guy, and that there's a lot of flawed starters out there around the league right now. I actually think maybe this team that won this next game that we'll talk about here, maybe they could be in the Justin Fields business too. Buccaneers 34, Packers 20, and they are certainly not going to be in a position, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, to draft a quarterback this year because they're probably going to win the damn NFC South. They have a 66% chance right now, according to the New York Times, to win that division. And Scott, with the way this offense looks, again, not perfect because Baker Mayfield is who he is, but Mike Evans is a future Hall of Famer. Chris Godwin finally pops up for a monster game. Rashad White's been running the ball well for the last month. I have settled that, hey, somebody's got to win the NFC South, and I think the Bucs are the right team to do it.
Yeah, Baker Mayfield picked a great time to have his best fantasy game of the year. And for the most part, Baker Mayfield is a fantasy conversation for us because we want to feel good about Mike Evans. We want to feel good about Godwin. We want to feel good about Rashad White, who has been grossly underrated. The cat's long out of the bag with White. I think everybody's on board now. But for half the year, it's like, he's not that good. He's not that good. He just gets touches on a team that's not that good. Well, he still gets those touches, and maybe he's better than we thought, and maybe the team's better than we thought.
I admit it. I'll cop to being one of the people that said exactly what you just said. So I definitely felt that way.
This was a rare day where Baker threw the 4 touchdowns, and there were 2 rogue touchdowns. Nobody's playing David Moore. No, I have nothing on Kieft, whatever his name is. I can't give. I don't know if he's in RP, but I don't have anything on him. It's a shame.
No, he's a tight end.
Cade Otton was tackled actually at the 1-yard line, and it's a little frustrating for the Godwin managers that he gets such a busy day but doesn't get in the end zone. It's kind of been Godwin's story this year. But for the most part, Tampa Bay goes down as this narrow tree. They're going to probably steal this division. Baker, most days, is good enough. And a day like today, he was excellent. Now, I don't know what the Packers defense really means here. Green Bay, have they just thrown up all over themselves after they put themselves in really good position? They find a way to lose to the Giants. They find a way to lose this game. But Baker Mayfield has been good. In fact, he was so good today, it made me wonder, who was the last Tampa Bay quarterback? Do you remember?
Jameis Winston?
Yeah, I thought it might have been Vinny Testaverde, but I could be wrong. I know he bounced around. Steve Young was on the Buccaneers for a while.
Josh Freeman?
Steve DeBerg. Freeman. I think it was Freeman, actually. I think you're right.
Freeman,
Okay.
Yeah, it was Josh.
Good.
Yeah, it was Josh Freeman. Yeah, we're all settled on that.
By the way, I was asked a ton. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say the O'Keefe, that was his first catch of the year. Was that one? There's that 2-yard touchdown. But yeah, Baker Mayfield has played pretty well. Love the way Rachaad White is running the ball. You mentioned how do we feel about the Packers defense? I mean, we feel really bad. That is such a brutal unit. I do think obviously it continues to be great to see promise from these young receivers. Nice game from Wicks today, who I was surprised he played. Mm-hmm. Jaden Reed has just scored a boatload of touchdowns this year, but it is going to go down as promising year overall from the offense. I do think they're kind of watching the playoffs slip away.
Yeah, at least Reed had that touchdown. It's interesting. Love could have run for the first down on that play, but he saw the window. I don't know if he made the right play or not because he threw it into a very tight window. Reed catches it, gets the puppies down, scores the touchdown. I was asked a lot of Aaron Jones questions today. We knew A.J. Dillon wasn't going to go. We know Patrick Taylor isn't somebody they have a role and vision for yet. So I thought, okay, well, Jones is going to get probably 15 to 20 touches. How bad could he be? Well, he got 17 touches for 69 yards and no touchdown. So that's how bad he could be. I think a lot of the people who wanted to play Aaron Jones, maybe the other running back was the right call, but when you see somebody with and I know Tampa Bay's a little bit of a pass funnel too. They usually are pretty good against the run and not that great against the pass. It feels like the Packers should have scored. Maybe they shouldn't have won this game, but they should have scored at least like 27, 28, 30 points. I feel like 20 is the bag is light here. I know they had some problems executing in the red zone. They had to settle for a couple of field goals. Love's like kind of a rich man's Fields right now where I like Love. I'm not madly head over heels for Love right now. I'm not going to make a bad pun that I could easily make, and part of it, we talked all year. They have the youngest receiver room in the league. So the fact that Reed looks a little bit better every week. Wicks has started to play. We know Christian Watson's been in and out of the lineup, has had an up and down year, but you got to give him another year to see who he is. The Packers should be trending in the right direction. Just maybe they were over their skis and we thought they were probably going to the playoffs.
Yeah, I think so. And Aaron Rodgers, not a perfect guy, but I think he actually gave pretty good analysis on Jordan Love after he had this like monster stretch on the Pat McAfee show where he's like, hey, like, let's not crown the guy right now. Like, let's let his career play out. And he's like, I would have said the same thing about when he was having a real down stretch. Let's not, bury him at this point. Like, I think we're definitely still in discovery mode for who Jordan Love is. I think he's good. Like, how good can he be? I think it's still an open question. But I do feel overall pretty promising and pretty optimistic about this Packers offense right now. Let's move to a massive AFC South matchup here. Texans 19, Titans 16. The Texans close it down at the very end of overtime. The Texans, B team, bro. Case Keenum's out there, throwing a Noah Brown. This is just not the Texans that we had been promised for most of this year, but pretty big win for them to stay involved in the AFC wild card mix at this point.
One of the most shocking performances. I wasn't asked a ton of Devin Singletary questions today, but I was asked a few, and we all know what Tennessee is. Mm-hmm. Mike Vrabel wakes up thinking nobody will run on me. And if you're going to make yards, you're going to do it through the air. Case Keenum, obviously a journeyman. So I didn't have high expectations that the Texans would do that much on offense. And look, they put up 19 points, including an overtime period. So I'm not going to say that this wasn't exactly the 1999 Rams or anything, but Singletary runs for $121. He catches 4 for 49. He just narrowly missed a game-winning touchdown in overtime. I think it was wiped out by a penalty. He was excellent. And I always thought Singletary could play, enough to be a factor and maybe squeeze his way into fantasy conversation. The fact that he could throw Dameon Pierce out of the way in this backfield, and look, Dameon Pierce he's a nice player. It's not like anybody thought Dameon Pierce was a star either. But if you said to me, well, can Singletary be relevant in Houston? I would think Pierce would have to either be really, really bad with like fumbles or mistakes or get hurt. I didn't think Singletary could win the job on merit, and he has thrown Pierce out of the way. And he produces today, backup quarterback against the team that prioritizes the run and usually stops the run really well. On the flip side, a lot of people needed Derrick Henry today, 16 carries, 9 yards. No, obviously no touchdown. You're not going to get much out of him in the passing game. You got 4 catches.
Yeah, 1 yard.
That's why Andy Behrens hates PPR, right? Because in PPR, he got you 4 points for the 4 catches, but 1 total yard. And everything you needed on the Titans just didn't come in, right? Hopkins had that game. He's going to have some of these games. 9 targets. He only catches 2 of them. The 1 touchdown they got was Will Levis running in the touchdown. Levis took 7 sacks. It felt like 27. I get. Look, this game probably felt like a 3-point game. It felt like a 3-0 game or a 6-3 game rather than the 1916 game it was. And man, I wish Noah Brown would stay healthy because he's had a couple of monster games. 8 for 82 and a touchdown with Case Keenum to me is a monster game. He had like a 160, 170 yard game with CJ Stroud maybe a month ago. He could play, man. Texans are fun. D'Amico Ryans was the right hire. And the fact that they did it today with so much key personnel on the sidelines, I thought it was one of the most interesting games. Neither one of these teams is going deep. I mean, the Texans make the playoffs. They're going to be eliminated pretty quickly. But obviously the arrow pointed up. They got the quarterback right. They got the coach right. And it showed today that some of their supplemental pickups that people weren't thinking that much on, they got those guys right too.
Yeah, it's a good call out on the supplemental pickups. I hope Will Levis is okay. He got destroyed in overtime. I was honestly surprised he walked off. It looked way more serious than
I thought
that.
I thought it was Levis' season over when I saw that.
Same, but he walked off again. We'll see what it comes of it next week. But that guy's fun, man. I mean, he is definitely reckless. He puts himself in harm's way, and that offensive line is not helping him either. 7 sacks today. Like, that is just a brutal pass protection group. But 14.4 intended air yards per attempt according to Next Gen Stats for Will Levis. That guy pushes the ball. So I do hope he ends up being the Titans starter next year. I think he's probably earned that right at this point, and I hope they can put some more pieces around him beyond just DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, because he does love to throw those prayer balls to DeAndre Hopkins, but let's get some more players around him that get open a little more routinely in the underneath game, and let's get him an offensive line because he is fun to watch. Let's recap the 3 Saturday games here, starting with Bengals 27, Vikings 24. Another overtime game and a game defined by backups, right? Jake Browning, an electric video from the Bengals account of him, screaming to the camera, "You shouldn't have effing cut me," about the Minnesota Vikings because he did get cut by the Vikings. He was on that roster. And obviously, he ends up winning the game here. The Bengals end up winning the game. Big performance from T. Higgins with 2 touchdowns. But Ty Chandler on the other side, man. I mean, fantasy playoff hero Ty Chandler, 23 carries, 132 yards, and a touchdown. Easily the best rushing performance, and 3 catches for 25 yards as well. Easily the best performance from a Vikings running back we've gotten all season.
Yeah, to me, the big key here was that Kevin O'Connell got Nick Mullins ready to play. I know it wasn't a perfect game. Mullins had a couple of picks. Yeah. He took some sacks. But 9.2 yards per attempt, over 300 yards passing. Jordan Addison has the blow-up game. Justin Jefferson, 7 catches, 6 catches for Hawkinson. Because for Chandler to be relevant, he needed the offense to stay on schedule. He needed the game to be within reason. You couldn't have the Bengals jump out to a big lead. It was actually the Vikings who somehow got the big lead and found a way to lose this game. It felt like it was Minnesota's game for 2 hours. But Mullins, I had to play him in the Superflex league. I put him on the sleeper list for Superflex reasons. I mean, you would not as a quarterback one. You couldn't have been that bad for quarterback this week. But it just reminds us he's been in the locker room for over almost 2 years now. He had some moments with San Francisco. We like Kevin O'Connell. We like the offensive pieces here. And as you said, I think a lot of people have been waiting on this Ty Chandler game. Maybe people needed it a month ago. Maybe some people who aren't in the playoffs have Ty Chandler on their bench and are like, I knew this was possible. But it was just encouraging that within a season defined by quarterback poor play and quarterback injury, we saw what the first 3 games, we're not going to talk about that Thursday abomination, but you'll get enough of that later in the week. But the first 3 games of the schedule, of the slate, were all backup quarterback games. And in so many cases, you just have to take the expectations way, way down. And I felt like Chandler was playable here. I felt like you probably had to play Jefferson. You could have played Addison. You probably played Hawkinson. And on the Bengals side, nice to see T. Higgins popping. Nice to see Joe Mixon in the end zone. I know it wasn't a great chase game, and he's got an injury now we have to worry about.
Yeah.
And talk about targeting the phone book. 13 players drew a target in this game. But the bottom line is this. Jake Browning's played well since the Burrow injury, and it didn't, in a different year with a different backup, would have been like, okay, the town is dead for us. You'll have to play Chase. You'll play Mixon holding your nose but you might have better options, and everybody else don't even look at those guys. And it hasn't been that bad at all. And a lot of people who lost Burrow, they may have picked up Browning. He's been perfectly fine through his 3 starts. So it's nice. And maybe it just shows too that the Bengals coaching staff is doing a better job than a lot of people realize. When Kevin O'Connell gets Nick Mullins ready to play, we like Kevin O'Connell. A lot of times people thought maybe the Bengals are successful despite their coaching. I think somebody there is doing a pretty good job.
You know who's doing a good job? Shane Steichen for the Indianapolis Colts.
Yes,
Colts
sir.
30, Steelers 13. Oh my God, the Steelers. But man, Scott, I mean, I watched this Colts game, and like from start to finish, and man, Michael Pittman was going to have a monster game. He has 4 catches for 78 yards on 5 targets before leaving after taking a brutal hit over the middle of the field from KZ, who was ejected on the Steelers side. He leaves the game early. Zach Moss leaves the game early. And suddenly, I mean, we are down to like the preseason roster here for the Indianapolis Colts. We know Gardner Minshew's he's just out there starting. 215 yards, 3 touchdowns for Gardner Minshew. He also ran 8 for 28 for Gardner Minshew. Just great stuff in the passing game. Thrown to DJ Montgomery. I do not have any perception notes for you on DJ Montgomery. Zach Moss, like I said, leaves the game. Trey Sermon, 17 carries for 88 yards, 11 carries for 69 yards from Tyler Goodson. And this team is just cruising to a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers.
It felt like a preseason game. Trey Sermon, preseason game. Tyler Goodson, was he in risky business? Good preseason game. DJ Montgomery, preseason game. Mo Alley Cox, I think he's at 7 catches and 3 touchdowns, something like that. Every time Mo Alley Cox does anything, I always say, I knew he could play. VCU legend. Mo Alley Cox, for sure. God love Colin. Producer Colin is cracking me up with his comments. You should have seen his list of Tampa Bay quarterbacks like 20 minutes ago. It was fantastic. But this felt like a preseason game, and the Steelers, Trubisky was so bad, they looked at Mason Rudolph as maybe a pick-me-up, maybe a solution. That's how bad you played, Mitch Trubisky. And by the way, I went up against him in a Superflex game that I got stomped in, and Trubisky played like dirt, but he did throw a touchdown to Deontay Johnson. He did run in a touchdown, so he had a playable score. I was going to lose the game, as it turns out. Anyway, Trubisky didn't beat me. He just made me a little salty on Saturday. But I'm curious, do you think the Steelers, Mike Tomlin famously has never had the losing season. He's staring at it right now. He's 7-7, and their offense has all sorts of problems. I think it's possible the Steelers and Tomlin have an amicable divorce coming. The Tomlin's a guy who will be, if he wants a job in 5 minutes, he'll have one, because every team that needs a coach is going to call him up. There's other coaches who are going to be available. I'm not sure if people want them or not. Bill Belichick's a really tough decision. He's super smart, but do you want him making the draft picks? He's in his 70s now. Everybody would want Mike Tomlin. What's your gut call on Mike Tomlin returning to Pittsburgh next season?
Well, I know there are definitely Steelers fans. We've talked about on the podcast that they're done with Mike Tomlin. They want to move on because, and honestly, a lot of what you said, like he's never had the losing season. It's like, well, they haven't played it well in the playoffs in a long time under Mike Tomlin
for a playoff win. Yeah.
And honestly, like, what are the things we criticize head coaches for? We criticize them when they screw up hiring, assistants. And I mean, the Matt Canada thing and sticking with the Matt Canada thing was so bad. Obviously, when you make the wrong quarterback call, Kenny Pickett in the first round was just a mistake. I don't think Pickett's played well enough to call it anything else. And 3, when it doesn't seem like the message is sinking in with players. And I mean, you just see it, like the lack of effort from some of these guys like George Pickens on the offense. Obviously, we talked about the Deontay Johnson thing when he didn't go for a fumble. Like this is a problem. There's something going on under the surface in Pittsburgh. And I mean, for Pickens to be out there like I don't like to call out guys for effort sometimes, like because it's seemingly ridiculous. But like watch this guy play right now, and like he's going through the motions on plays where he knows he's not involved, and like it's just bad. Like it's just not good. And I think if you're not asking questions about Tomlin right now, I think you're doing it wrong. Like, I don't know if firing him is the right move. I agree with you. If he gets fired, he's going to be picked up by somebody else and energize that culture almost immediately. But it's culture. Something's wrong here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, the last playoff season they won a game was after the 2016 season, when obviously Roethlisberger was still the quarterback and D'Angelo Williams was on the roster, Eli Rogers, Jesse James, Kobe Hamilton,
wow.
Sammy Colts. They still had Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, which was a circus in and of itself. Darius Hayward Bay. It's just crazy how old some of these names seem right now. But and I'm glad you brought up the Pickens play, right? Because Warren's going to score a touchdown if Pickens makes just even a get in the way block. You don't have to use your hands. Just be interested in this play. And Pickens was like, I'll take this play off. Even though the play's
going. He like hops over a guy.
He hops over a guy while his teammate's struggling to try to get in the end zone in a game that has playoff ramifications on national TV in December. It's a bad look, George Pickens. You got to get that out of your system.
Bad look. I mean, and just I said it all the time. You can't have a normal conversation about George Pickens, but it's like, we're talking about George Pickens right now. Like, this guy's not even close to a star receiver. I mean, he might think he is, and I know some people think he is, but he's not. And like to be doing this stuff, it's like it's crazy. So look, you don't fire Mike Tomlin because George Pickens loafs on a running play or anything like that. But again, to not ask questions about like what's up in Pittsburgh, I think you'd be doing a disservice here to that football team.
And let me just put a period on this. I'm not saying Pittsburgh should fire Tomlin, although I know some of the Steelers fans might be in that camp. I just wonder if maybe, just like I don't think Belichick is ever going to get fired. I just think it's one of those things where it might be like, let's get together. What's in the best interest of our mutual future? Is it together? Is it not together? It could be just an amicable separation. And with Belichick and the Patriots, it's coming. I think with Pittsburgh and Tomlin, I think they're going to have a long talk after the season. And maybe they're just going to say, you know what, maybe it's just time. Pittsburgh has obviously run really well with the coaches, right? I mean, they famously had those three coaches. Noel was there forever for their glory days. And then they handed off to Cowher, and then he has glory days. And then Tomlin's been a fan. Tomlin wasn't even really their target when they hired him. He just aced the interview. And I know Viking fans were sick over it because they thought he was going to be their coach someday. But Tomlin skipped a couple of steps because he was so impressive and they saw the potential of what he could be. But sometimes coaches aren't made to stay in the same place forever, especially in a sport like football. And maybe it's just time to have a different voice in there. And again, I'm not saying anything negative about Mike Tomlin, because if your team needs a coach, that's the first guy you would interview when he's available.
Yeah, you just can't play like football in this day and age. You can't play in this style where like you're not winning on the margins and you're just so conservative, all this stuff. Like they need to be more competitive on offense, period. Like you can't just be, all right, we're great in the fourth quarter. That's not enough. There are 4 quarters in the game. You can't just be good in one of them. Broncos weren't really good in any quarter. The final game on Saturday here, Lions 42, Broncos 17, 5 touchdown passes for Jared Goff. I mean, basically just about anything you wanted from the Detroit Lions in fantasy, you got it against the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, only David Montgomery. I mean, he landed about 80 total yards, didn't get the touchdown, but every other major player did. Gibbs had 2, Laporta had 3, Sun God had a huge game. So, okay, it's home, Jared Goff. Ben Johnson was cooking with the play sheet, and we know the Lions have indoor life for the rest of the season. They have some tough teams to play, but it's all going to be climate controlled. So I would think this offense is one of the easier ones for fantasy. It's pretty narrow on the concentration. There's guys we want to play. They have 2 backs you can use, a number 1 receiver, a number 1 tight end. So I don't even think there's really that much to say. Just the Bears game was outside against a defense that was playing well. I think you just write it off. Goff should be good enough the rest of the way, and he's surrounded by really good playmakers. The good news for the Broncos is they have a great schedule after this. Now, it's obviously disappointing. You only put up 17 points against the Lions team that's just been given it away like Halloween candy, but at least we know where to go. I mean, Sutton's going to be their goal line guy. Judy had a decent game Saturday night, but I wouldn't go near him. And Wilson will have 2 total touchdowns. That's what you're going to get. No more, no less. They're right around, even during this 6-2 streak, they average about 295 yards a game. This has never been a high upside offense, but at least we know who we can play here. I still think, when they play the Chargers, you might want to use the Broncos, and then they have another, maybe the Patriots are in there, and they'll control that game. So I don't feel that bad about Denver, even though they didn't play well this game. Peyton was yelling at Russell Wilson late in the game, but It's just nice to see Detroit get off the mat and do the things that we expected from them more often than not.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just this Broncos team is very limited. That was always the case. It was clear they were not like letting Russ cook or anything like that. He was not the driving force of this team. And when you get into a situation where you need to drop back, you need to throw a ton, and you got to try to get out of a hole like this, it was never going to happen. Like, this is just not the game script for this version of the Denver Broncos. But man, what an encouraging performance from the Lions, who needed a game like this, I think, to kind of just shake off the bad vibes. I mean, there's still going to be trust issues with Jared Goff and this team. If they have to go on the road in the playoffs and play a good team, that's going to exist. But to know that this offense still has this within it, I mean, shoot, even to see some stuff from Jamison Williams, like if 4 catches, 47 yards, that's about the best you can hope for with the way Jamison Williams is playing right now. But it's something. And so again, I think this was pretty big for the Lions to get the final game on Saturday. Let's move to the rest of the games. Wrap it up here from Sunday. Chiefs 27, Patriots 17. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, this is a game I spent most of my early window watching. I don't feel like that was altogether rewarding, but I did watch it. It was a football game that was played. Apparently there's a big pop star in attendance. The ancillary Chiefs all came in. I was asked a lot of CEH versus McKinnon questions, and they both scored about the same. Edwards-Helaire had a touchdown catch. McKinnon had a touchdown catch, a touchdown run. As you would expect, CEH had more touches, but they were both totally playable as like those lower
McKinnon had
RB2s.
He passed he threw a touchdown.
He did, yeah, that little shovel pass. When I first saw it, I'm like, oh, cool, I have Mahomes. There's a touchdown pass for Mahomes. Oh, no, that's Jerick McKinnon. That's not Patrick Mahomes. But even Mahomes got home. Somehow Mahomes got, and also Rashee Rice, who, look, he's graduated. He's gone from you should pick him up to, yeah, you should probably play him unless you're really good at receiver, to like, hey, look, he's just a start now. Don't even ask us Rashee Rice questions anymore. Now, I get it. The setup was perfect. You know, the Patriots are going to prioritize Kelsey, but Rice finding the quiet spots in the zone. He did those trust throws, right? He's getting those. Patrick Mahomes, if Patrick Mahomes was going to fall, he would trust Rashee Rice to catch him on the fall. That's where we're at right now. For some reason, they targeted Kadarius Toney 4 times. One of them was a through the hands interception, which almost cost Minnesota the pick or the cover, which would have been really frustrating. But Kelsey did not do much in this game. He got banged up late. It looked like it might have been a serious injury, but then he came back in the game. It's just nice to see, for the most part, Kansas City, it's been, okay, yeah, Mahomes great. Kelsey, he's still good, even though he's 34 good. I guess you can use one of their running backs when Pacheco isn't playing. You don't feel that great about it. I wish they'd use Rice more. Well, Rice has graduated. Both the running backs came in. Mahomes should always be over 300 yards. He was over 300 yards today. It was good to see the Chiefs, and they would have scored more if Butker didn't miss his first kick of the year. They looked more – they didn't blow New England out of the building or anything. But I think we thought like there'd be a bounce back from the Chiefs. I think for the most part that happened today.
Never forget the fantasy analyst that hyped up Kadarius Toney. I mean, that dude, why is he even on the field at this point? Like, I mean,
I would not dress him at this point. I would not.
It's crazy that they still are. It is truly the definition of insanity.
It's unredeemable and interesting to point out, by the way, and I'm not picking on Kelsey because Patriots still have a pretty good defense. But without question, the best tight end in the field today was Hunter Henry. He was 7 for 66 and a touchdown. And he had a second touchdown wiped out by a penalty. He was really, really good. He also got banged up in this game early, but he came back. And man, Zappe threw for 180 and 5.8 YPA. I thought he played worse than that. He made a couple of, talk about prayer throws. He threw a pass to Devontae Parker, which was just a hope throw. And Parker turned around and the ball basically caught Parker. The touchdown pass to Henry was a 50-50 ball. I guess if you like the player, you say, well, he gave my player a chance to make a play. But I think Zappe, he got out of this game with 4 sacks and 1 pick. It easily could have been like 7 sacks and like 3 picks. But right now, he's the best guy they got. And did you see the Patriots give up in this game late? They decided, you know what, forget it. We're not going to call our timeouts, and we're not going to try to score a garbage time touchdown. Let's just get on the bus. This game's over.
Yeah, hardcore sim to the end energy from Bill Belichick and the Patriots right now. That is for sure. I'm very curious, Scott, what you've got to say on this next game, which I saw a lot of. Rams 28, Commanders 20.
Yeah, man, the Rams 28, and I gave out Rams over 28 and a half, and that kind of stung because I feel like they had a 40 burger percolating, and there were 2 Kieran Williams fumbles, and there were missed kicks and stuff like that. This felt like a game that it should have been a blowout win for Washington. But say this for Sean McVay. Williams has the 2 early fumbles. And how many coaches are going to be like, okay, he'll learn his lesson. He's not playing for a quarter. He's not playing for a half.
We'll talk about one later.
Yeah, he may not play for the rest of the day. You'll learn your lesson. Fumbling is bad. No. They kept rolling with him. Williams was terrific. Njoku had at least one drop in this game that was pretty bad. Whatever. Sean McVay's not doing that. Now, McVay looked really frustrated when they missed that late field goal, and then the Commanders got some late points. We'll get to the Commanders in a second. But for the most part, the Rams were who they thought they were. We were pumping them up as like, this could be a December to remember team. They're hitting their stride at the right time. Look how great the schedule is. This should have been a day they scored 42. I know it says 28 on the box score. They played a lot better than that. Again, they littered the field with some mistakes at the wrong times, but they were moving the ball kind of at will, and maybe a little bit of that playing with their food that you talk about, because they knew Washington couldn't really fight back. Well, Washington eventually did fight back a little bit because they benched Sam Howell. Mr. QB6, but nobody believes he's QB6. And today he played like he was QB 56. And he was so bad. And then Brissett comes in and he throws the garbage time touchdown to McLaurin. Then he throws almost another touchdown to McLaurin, tackle at the 1. And then the refs give Washington like 17 plays at the goal line until they finally score a touchdown. And man, I know nobody cares about this. I'm not a 4-team parlay kind of guy, but I had a 4-team parlay that only needed the Rams. And I'm like, it was a good enough ticket that I thought, I should try to middle this. So I tried to middle it with Commanders +7. I should have waited till the Commanders line went up a little bit. If they make the extra point, which they attempted to kick, I hit one of the best middles of my life, and I'm thinking he's lining up to kick it. I'm like, I don't know why I think he's going to miss this. It's like the blackjack table with the dealers. You have 20 and the dealer is 16. You're like, I don't know why I think the next card's a 5. Well, the next card was a 5. The kick was blocked. No middle for me. But it's so funny to me, Matt, that in a year defined by quarterbacks getting hurt and benched, that Jacoby Brissett and Jameis Winston, 2 of the most well-known, well-paid backups who I'm dying to watch play, can't get on the field. With the Saints have stayed dedicated to Carr, and he was better today. We'll talk about him later. And I guess Howell's been okay. I don't really think Howell has. I think Howell's future is lower than average starter, or maybe really good backup. I don't know. Not that Brissett is anything different than that, but it's just so funny that in a year where the backups have played so much, it took this long for Jacoby Brissett to get any meaningful time.
I'm so upset. I'm so upset about it, man.
As a McLaurin guy, right? Yeah.
As a McLaurin guy, as a Samuel guy, as a Dotson guy, but especially a McLaurin guy, man. I mean, it was upsetting to watch. And Ron Rivera is going to get fired. There was a report today that like everybody in the building knows he's getting fired, and no surprise there. I think it was from Diana Rossini that had this. Like they're firing Rivera. Everybody knows that. Like I said, on like what's going to be one of his final games. The defense is still blowing coverages. I mean, Cooper Kupp, they've been blowing coverages for a long time there in Washington. That was one of the most egregious on his touchdown. Nobody's even close to him. I mean, not even close to him doesn't do it justice how wide open he was. There's that. He kicks the extra point, like you said, that they miss when he needs to go for 2 in that moment. He does the conservative thing. Shout out to Ron Rivera for always being way too conservative. Riverboat Ron, LOL, what a weird nickname that is because it doesn't fit. And then third, this weird fascination that they've had with Sam Howell. I mean, I get it. Howell's a young guy, but they have clearly overrated him the entire time. And just to make this about me for a second, I mean, to be gaslit all year long by people like, well, how come Terry McLaurin's not producing because Sam Howell leads the NFL in pass yards? I mean, congratulations. Jacoby Brissett gets in there and immediately, I think they even said it on the broadcast, like players, not plays. I don't think it's all Sam Howell's fault. I'm not putting all the blame at his feet, but I mean, I wish we had seen Jacoby Brissett a lot earlier, and I think Washington would have been better off for it. They might have been in a better position than they are right. Not a great position because Sam Howell's it's not all his fault, but man, I'm definitely upset that a year of McLaurin's career, again, wasted with like you said, probably a really good backup level quarterback.
I mean, the problem is that because Howell's a younger player, there's the upside of the unknown that you have to tap in. You have to see if Sam Howell has anything he can develop. And I realize we don't want to be overly judgmental early in a player's career, but after seeing a year of Sam Howell, I feel pretty confident we know what he is. He's like a Ryan Fitzpatrick type that he will look good on the right day. And he's competitive as heck, and he's just athletic enough to run for a first down once in a while. He's physical. I think he's even a decent leader, but he does not have the physical attributes to ever be better than average or even average. And, you have to, in fact, at this point, if he had the Ryan Fitzpatrick career, I think we'd take it because Fitzpatrick played for everybody. He's a great immaculate grid answer and all that. But if I were Washington, they like a quarterback in the draft, I'd go for it.
Same. I kind of feel the same way about Eric Bieniemy in that offense at this point too. Like after seeing a year of it, I'm like, okay, I think the expectations of the ceiling need to be dialed down a little bit. I definitely think the Rams are in a good spot, and I hope they make the playoffs because McVay's done a great job this year. I love a lot of the points that you made about him in this game. So encouraging stuff for the Los Angeles Rams. Another NFC West team took a team to the woodshed. Another NFC West team. 49ers 45, Cardinals 29. I mean, Brock Purdy throws 4 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey leads the team in receiving. He catches 2 of those touchdowns. And look, run from it, hide from it, whatever. It comes all the same. Like, we're going to have Brock Purdy MVP discourse, and it just, like, it is what it is. I know you hate the award, Scott, but that is definitely coming. Don't waste your time arguing about it online, people. Just find something better to do.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a lot of it next week when they play Baltimore because the award has become the quarterback on the 1 or 2 seed award. Cooper Kupp was, I've always said this, just make it most outstanding player of the year. It will often be a quarterback, but it opens you up to Cooper Kupp winning in 2021, which he should have. There's at least one year where J.J. Watt was the best player in football. And he was
How about McCaffrey this year?
How about McCaffrey this year? For sure. The big moment in this game, the big scary moment, there's a time in the first half where both Purdy and McCaffrey were off the field. I think Purdy went in the tent. McCaffrey looked dinged up. It's like, oh no. Did the best team in football, the best offense in football, just lose its 2 most important pieces? But no, they came back, and Purdy had the usual 4 touchdown, no pick, no sack, 9.7 yards per attempt. I mean, his efficiency stats. If you just went on quarterback efficiency, who's got the best offense in football? Is their quarterback having a great year? Yes. All those boxes are checked. Then of course he'd win the MVP. But then it comes down to, well, it's McCaffrey and it's Shanahan and it's Samuel's having just a monster. He's on what a binge he's on right now. We always fear sometimes that they'll cannibalize each other. And San Francisco, even though they did score 45 points, there was a defensive component. Kittle, who would block all day if you asked him, only had 2 catches. Ayuk only had 3 for 37 on 5 targets. Just sometimes there won't be enough for everybody to get a piece of it. But these guys are a wagon, and I'm just glad they're not hurt. Did Hollywood Brown get hurt in this game, or just choose to retire? Or he did get hurt? Okay,
yeah, he was off and on with that heel that he's been dealing with. Like he kind of is a guy that I think might need to shut it down at this point.
Yeah, I figured he might have because they did target 10 guys, and McBride's another guy who was dinged up in this game but did come back. Kyler was competitive. The offense, man, 5.4 yards per attempt. Connor got the early touchdown and actually had a pretty good day. I'm sure I steered a lot of people away from Connor, but it was just easy to see this game getting out of hand. I don't know where I'm at with Kyler Murray right now. He's not a bad quarterback.
Got banged up in this one too. I mean, just a lot of injuries.
Obviously, he's got such little help right now because there's no number 1 receiver, and the offensive line. It seems like how many good offensive lines are there in football right now? 5 or 6. And I know Dallas lost a key piece of their line today, but it feels like Kyler's running for his life every play. And he looked a little bit skittish, but anybody would have been skittish based on the rush he was facing. What do you feel good about McBride? Do you feel good about, could you play James Conner going forward? Could you play? A lot of people were asking me today, Kyler Murray, or do I wait for Jalen Hurts, which I thought was a really tough call.
Yeah.
Could you get the backup for Hurts? Could you get Mariota? How do you feel about that? I think most people, I told them, if you can get Mariota, I think Hurts is going to play anyway. Just wait for Hurts. And based on what Murray did, it looks like the right move, although we'll see what happens on Monday. But what's your state of the Cardinals right now?
I think that Murray is probably their guy moving forward. I think he probably should be their guy moving forward if they don't find themselves in a 1 or in the 1st or 2nd overall pick, which I don't think is going to happen at this point. Certainly not 1st overall. I mean, my God, that's Carolina Panthers with a bullet. But I think he's shown enough for them to kind of feel good about him as their franchise quarterback. I think playing him rest of the season, though, is probably something I don't want to do in fantasy.
Carolina's on a winning streak. I don't know who is the tiebreaker. They're only 1 game behind Arizona now.
All right, final 3 games here. We can rapid fire these, man, because these were pretty disastrous. Starting with Dolphins 30, Jets 0. Whatever magic the Jets had last weekend, it is all gone. Meanwhile, the Dolphins get a huge win, a big performance from Jaylen Waddle and Raheem Mostert, who now has scored more touchdowns this season, Scott, than he had in his entire career.
We had fun on Twitter talking about out of nowhere seasons. and some great. It seems like 70% of them played for the Cleveland Browns, which was fun. Jaylen Waddle gets to be the number one receiver for a day and basically does the Tyreek Hill 8 for 142 and a touchdown on 9 targets. Most of it was all touchdown deodorant. HN had a quiet game. The defense was really good, and Tua only had to throw 24 passes. The problem with the only reason more Miami guys didn't come in is because the Jets didn't fight back at all. And the only 2 Jets we care about were Breece Hall, 7 touches for 18 yards, and Garrett Wilson, who had 3 for 29 on 4 targets. Both Simeon and Zach Wilson had to play because Zach Wilson got hurt. Man, we talk about this all the time. All I want from Garrett Wilson is a chance to get 70 yards. I never blame him. I thought he actually looked as good as you can look for a 3 for 29 day because he's Garrett freaking Wilson, but he's just got no chance with these quarterbacks. That's, IBID. We've said that all season.
I said some very stupid things about the Jets, potentially upsetting the Dolphins on the preview show this week. And then like 3 minutes into this game, I was like, oh my God, what? I'm a moron.
I picked the Jets and it was obvious, this game was over, before the second quarter.
Yeah. I'm an idiot. What else is new? All right. Saints 24, Giants 6. Similarly, the Tommy DeVito thing kind of comes to an end here. They go into New Orleans, and really this one was kind of in the bag with the Saints for the duration of the contest.
You like the Dolphins. Saints, game day scratch, Chris Olave. So who's the big winner here? Juwan Johnson had a touchdown. Jimmy Graham, who's still playing football, had a touchdown. Keith Kirkwood had a touchdown. So if you needed Taysom Hill, he did almost nothing in this game. If you needed, God forbid, you needed vulture touchdown from Jamal Williams, he didn't get it. Kamara had plenty of touches, but 110 total yards and no touchdown in a game they controlled. You probably wanted a little bit more. And Carr played well enough to keep his job. Again, he phone booked it. Lynn Bowden Jr. is getting targets. A.T. Perry, who I would like to see more of, had a couple of targets. Some people might have played Shaheed. If they're going to spread their usage just thin, it's how can anybody get home? And they were the good side. They were the 24 points. On the flip side, Barkley was bottled up. He did nothing. DeVito was under duress, took 7 sacks. The Saints were even throwing his signature celebration move at him, which I actually think is funny when teams do that. But
yeah, that's the best. Yeah, you got to do. You got to do it if you're gonna have a signature celebration.
Yep, for sure,
you got to be ready to have it thrown back in your face.
I remember Sean Green once scored a playoff touchdown and did LaDainian Tomlinson's celebration, and LT got mad about it. It's like, hey, win the game. If you don't like it, your team should stop Sean Green. Just like it never bothered me when LaDainian Tomlinson was called LT. And people are like, that's Lawrence Taylor's nickname. No, those are initials. Initials don't belong to anybody. Like if I say MJ, it could be Michael Jackson, it could be Michael Jordan. There's a bunch of MJs. There's a bunch of CCs. Does AA mean Pocket Aces or American Airlines or Anthony Anderson? I don't know. Initials belong to everybody.
Fair enough. I didn't expect a LaDainian Tomlinson get banged in a big spot. I also didn't expect Jimmy Graham to have, I believe, 6 catches and 4 touchdowns on the season in the year 2023.
Right. He's having the Mo Alley Cox season, NFC style. And any age you told me for Jimmy Graham, I would believe.
Yeah, he's 55 at this point, I believe.
Yeah, he's like Gordie Howe's age or something like that. He's up there.
Final game here.
Oh, God. Oh, no. This team, man. No.
Panthers 9, Falcons 7. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. 13 touches, 75 yards, no touchdowns. The Falcons scored 7 points on the damn Panthers. Bijan Robinson, the opposite of what you talked about earlier, where he has a fumble, never touches the ball again. I think he might have played like 1 or 2 snaps after that fumble when Tyler Algier was already leading the way. This was a pretty bad performance from the Atlanta Falcons, who at times looked like they were going to maybe take control of that NFC South. What a listless, lifeless way for that to end.
I'll just quickly get the Panthers out of the way. Happy to see them get a win. They've played hard for the second coaching staff. I think they actually played hard for Frank Reich. The defense isn't that bad. Chuba Hubbard, he gets touches every week. He's kind of like Joe Mixon without the touchdown equity. Nobody thinks he's that great, but whatever. 22 for 87, 2 for 16. You'll take it. You really can't play anybody else here. We've moved on from Adam Thielen. It's not going to happen for Jonathan Mingo this year. Good for the Panthers. You got to win. It rained all day, so a lot of people were wisely not playing Drake London, or at least thinking about it, even though he looked great last week, realizing this was kind of a tricky spot, and you never know when Arthur Smith can Arthur Smith you. But, okay, Desmond Ridder has problems. He threw a really bad red zone pick, bad weather. The Panthers are playing good ball, whatever that means. It's the NFC South. Is there even good ball in the NFC South? I guess that
nope.
Once in a while. That's all understandable. So you couldn't get Pitts going or London going, or you didn't want Ridder to decide this game. That's fine. Putting Bijan Robinson in fumble jail in a 9-7 game that you lose that may keep you out of the playoffs, in my mind, is a fireable offense.
Yeah. I think Atlanta has to think about making some serious changes. Maybe they don't blow this regime up, Terry Fontenot, Arthur Smith, but I think they got to get in there and like Arthur Blank goes into the team to kind of put his foot down and be like, we can't be playing football this way. Like, not in the year 2023. We can't be operating this way. We can't be, using top 10 picks on guys and then, throwing them in fumble jail. It's just not how it's going to work.
You know what? If they don't make the playoffs, I think Smith is going to get fired.
I think there's a chance. I don't know how I totally feel about that because I do think he's a good offensive play caller, but I mean, just the managing personnel stuff is so bad. And the Desmond Ridder stuff is so bad. And that was their guy. Like, they walked into the season this year with Desmond Ridder completely unchallenged, only adding Taylor Heineke, who's just a backup. Like, they get what they deserve, I think, on this one.
And I realize, like it's a joke that Frank Reich gets hired and gets fired in the same season, but this is the third year of Arthur Smith, and it's probably going to be the third losing season. I don't know. I think 3 years is enough to have a referendum on who somebody is, and they've thrown so much. We've said this all year. There's no need to really belabor the point, but they've thrown so much draft capital at offensive skill players who everybody's convinced are super, super talented, especially Pitts and Robinson, and you're getting almost nothing. You're wasting them. You're wasting Robinson's. I like Tyler Algier for what he is, a change of pace, number 2 back. He's not a featured back. Not when you have Robinson anyway. Maybe he would be on last year's team. That's fine. And of course, just the Falcons wouldn't be the Falcons without Cordarrelle Patterson, who I have nothing against Cordarrelle Patterson. Last season was brought up as one of those surprise seasons out of nowhere. It was glorious. Of course, it was Cordarrelle Patterson who scored the touchdown during the fantasy quarterfinals. Of course, it was. You could just set your watch by. It would be him or Jonnu Smith or Van Jefferson or Tucker Fisk. Tell me everything you know about Tucker Fisk. Arthur Smith's the problem here. They need a better quarterback too, but Arthur Smith should not come back.
I think I made a passing joke at some point, maybe on this show, that, hey, Arthur Smith, builds up like, Bijan Robinson's the feature back, just to like tear it all down in the first week of the fantasy playoffs as a final FU to the fantasy football community. That's clearly he's got in the back of his mind. And that is like actually what happened. So if I put that into the universe, I apologize, people. But I think that is an appropriate place for us to end week 15 on, Scott. A reminder for you all out there, it's fantasy postseason. And our new segment on the People's Panic Meter show, the Fantasy Forensic Files. Did one guy blow your season? Did one guy on your opponent's team end your season? Did you get eliminated from a bad beat? We want to hear about it. Send in your screenshots, video, voice memos, email rants to fantasymailbag@yahoosports.com. You can tweet them at me or Andy Behrens as well. We will feature them on the Tuesday pod and break down how it happened, how you can live with it, and what we can learn from it. Until then, we're out.